Hello, we're back and I have the most gorgeous fresh figs. These are from a dear friend who has a fig tree that produces really well. And so she gave us 4 pounds of these gorgeous, delicious figs. And I am going to make a recipe that she recommended because she had made it with them. A brandied shallot-fig preserves. And this recipe, I don't think it's on the freshpreserving.com website, which is the Ball website, but it is in this book. It's the all new Ball book of canning. So it's in this book, page 110, Brandied Shallot-Fig preserves. So that is what we're going to do today. But I wanted to really make this video a little bit more different from past and make it more useful maybe for you. And that is, once you, number one, how do you do this, right? Let's take some fresh figs and make something with it that can be preserved for later use. Number two, then how do we use it, right? That's kind of some of the things, like when you get into canning, you get really excited, at least I did, over the years, and you just start making things like crazy because you're like, oh my gosh, this is fun, I want to do this. And then at some point you come to like a reality check about, do I really need 25 jars of, you name it, whatever it is? No, probably not. Maybe not. Actually, I don't know. Everyone has different needs, right? But I want to make things that are actually useful. So we're going to make this, and then I'm going to show you one of the things that you can do with it to make it more useful within your life. All right, so I need to get these figs processed. Let's get going. So with this recipe, it's really easy. I mean, I haven't made it yet, but just reading through it, the first thing you're going to do is actually bake the shallot, the cut up shallots, and the figs. It says to do it on a baking sheet. I prefer to use Pyrex, so that's what I'll be using. I'm going to do this over 2 Pyrex dishes though. The fresh figs do not need to be cut, so I'm literally just going to put them, they've already been washed and trimmed, but I'm just going to put them probably half and half, right? So 2 pounds in here and 2 pounds in the other dish. And then you have to thinly slice your shallots because the shallots are going to go in the pan too. All right, so let's start there. And it doesn't say single layer or anything like that, but I wouldn't stack them too high. So I'm going to get all of these shallots sliced. It says thinly sliced. So that'll take a few minutes here, but I'm going to get all of these shallots thinly sliced, or 2 cups worth. I think this is going to be pretty much close to 2 cups. And then I am going to divvy up the sliced shallots between the 2 Pyrex dishes, which are each filled with figs. My oven is preheated to 350 degrees. All right, so let me get this done and I'll see you back in just a little bit. So I've got everything ready. I was looking at the recipe again. It did say single layer, so I'm glad I have them in 2 pans, right? 2 Pyrex dishes here. I did not need to use all of the shallots. I measured out what I needed. It was 2 cups, so I have the rest of the shallots back in the fridge. The other thing I did was I actually put down some olive oil, a very, very light coating of olive oil on the bottom of both of these pans because it said to spray with some cooking spray. And we don't have cooking spray. I try not to use that, but I just did a very thin little layer of olive oil. So these are now gonna go into the 350 degree preheated oven for 25 minutes. So while the figs and the shallots are in the oven, we're gonna get started on the next step of a different recipe, but related to how we're gonna use this. Before I go there, I wanted to let you know that after 25 minutes in the oven, We are going to sprinkle 1.5 cups of sugar over the fig shallot mixture and then put it back in the oven for 15 more minutes. So because I have it over 2 Pyrex dishes, I'm gonna put in 3/4 cup of organic evaporated cane juice sugar spread over the 2 pans, so 3/4 cup on each. But we'll do that when the timer goes off, and then we'll bake again for 15 minutes. Okay. So how we're gonna use these fig shallot preserves is as a pizza base, as like the sauce, the pizza sauce base. I've done this with a red wine fig jam that is really good. And I think this is gonna be just as good, if not better, in that way. So what I do is I make my own pizza dough, and I make this in 4 doughs at a time, right? So 4 pieces at a time. Depending on you and your family, you might go through 1 pizza dough for a pizza night. It might be 2. When our kids were little, it was 1. They are now 5 and 7, and with, you know, a pizza with 8 pieces, we need to now do 2 pizzas. So 1 batch of my pizza dough will last 2 separate weeks. Every Friday night is our pizza night. But this is the recipe I use. It is from this book, Artisan Bread in 5 Minutes a Day. There are some great recipes in here. I mind you that what I have taken away from this book the most, though, is just the process of actually getting the dough going, which takes literally 5 minutes, is kind of what they say, leaving it on the counter to do its bulk ferment, and then put it in the fridge and leave it in the fridge until you're ready to bake. I do that a lot with my doughs. But the recipe in here that I use for our pizza dough is called olive oil dough. It works really well for focaccia or like an olive bread. The fruitier the olive oil, the better. But this, I think, makes a fantastic pizza crust. And this is for all-purpose flour. So I am not going to be using all-purpose flour because I prefer to grind our own flour. I'll probably be using a mixture of soft white wheat and spelt for my pizza doughs. I kind of just go back and forth with whatever at the time. And but just know that you can use all-purpose flour, and it works, and it comes out great. That's how these recipes were tested. So we're gonna get the dough going. We're gonna use the KitchenAid stand mixer to get everything going, and then we'll get the bulk ferment started for our dough while this is in the oven. All right, make sense? Let's go. So I've got everything to start grinding my flour first, right? If you're using all-purpose flour, you're just measuring out 6.5 cups. But the first thing you're doing is really getting the salt, the yeast, sugar, and olive oil in your, you can't really see it probably, my KitchenAid mixer in the bowl, just so that the yeast can start coming back and being reconstituted. I'm actually doing my flour first because that takes a couple more minutes, right? And I want to get that done first. So I am going to be doing a mixture of half and half. So spelt and a soft white wheat. If you're unfamiliar with grinding your own grains and how to choose what, I really recommend, you know, doing some reading and research, but also just trying things out. So I know that a hard white wheat or a hard red wheat has a lot more gluten, has a lot more structure and proteins. And so that's really good for a free form standing loaf. If you're looking for something that is going to be spreading a bit, cookies, pancakes, waffles, pizza dough, I go more with a soft white wheat or a spelt. A spelt is very similar to a soft white wheat. It's just an ancient grain, less processed over decades or centuries for that matter. Same with einkorn. Einkorn is an ancient grain that can be used, I think, for either or, but it's a little more finicky of a grain, so save that for another video. So half soft white wheat, half spelt. I'm gonna start the machine, the mock mill first, and then I'll start adding my grains in. You'll start seeing it come out. I won't be talking over it because it is pretty loud. Okay. Our flour is ground. Now what I did was I put 2 cups of the spelt whole grains in and 2 cups of the soft white wheat whole grains. So I haven't quite measured my flour yet, right, to 6.5 cups, but I will do that. If I need a little bit more, I'll add more. If I have too much, it's okay. I'll just put the rest in a container and put it in the fridge. Now, when you have freshly ground grains, you want to use them pretty quickly. I'm not saying immediately, but pretty quickly, within a couple of hours probably. If you're not planning on doing that, right, if you want to do something in advance, grind something in advance, that's okay. Just put it in the fridge or the freezer for more long term. Fridge for a couple of days. So anything left over will go in the fridge and will be used. Now that this is done, let's go to the KitchenAid mixer and get our yeast reconstituted. Okay, so I've got the KitchenAid mixer going with the, or ready with the dough hook. This recipe calls for 1.5 tablespoons of instant dry yeast. There's 1/2. And 1.5 tablespoons of sea salt. So 1/2. And remember, we're making 4 doughs here. And then 1 tablespoon of sugar. Just to help give the yeast something to feed on. Okay, and then our liquid. So it's asking for 2 3/4 cup lukewarm water. In my normal fashion, I kind of do things on my own. So I follow recipes, but I make my own twist. I have a lot of extra whey here from making cheese. So I'm actually gonna put whey in as a substitute for the lukewarm water. Now the whey has been in the refrigerator, so it's not even near lukewarm. That's okay. Lukewarm just helps the yeast kind of start a little quicker, right? So this just might take a little longer for my yeast to get reconstituted and activated. So I'm gonna be using whey instead of water. Again, I'm doing things more complicated because that's just who I am apparently. But you can use all-purpose flour and you can use lukewarm water. So let's measure out 2 3/4 cup. Okay, and I'm gonna just put that in there. And so I'm gonna let this sit for probably anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes. The yeast will start producing kind of a bubbly, foamy action, and that's how you know you're ready for the next step. Okay, the timer went off. I'm gonna do my sugar and put it back in. So remember, I'm doing 3/4 cup per Pyrex dish. Seems like a lot, doesn't it? This actually makes 4 1-pint jars. So I might actually do 8 half-pint jars, because I can't imagine I'm going to need more than a 1/2 pint for a pizza dough. Pizza base, I should say. Okay, and in the oven, these will back go. Back go, right? That's proper English. They'll back go. Okay, it's foaming a little bit. I've let this sit for probably between 10 and 15 minutes. So now we're gonna get the rest of our ingredients in and get this into a dough. I'm gonna very carefully put in my measured flour. Remember, 6.5 cups. And start mixing. Slowly, so we don't get flour everywhere. And remember, this is an olive oil dough, that's what it's called, so I will be adding some olive oil. Okay, if you can see that, but it's coming together and pulling away. I'm just gonna add some drizzles in. I think the recipe calls for a 1/4 cup. And that's it. Okay, and now I'm gonna leave it in here. I'm just gonna cover it and let it bulk proof. Okay, so I didn't cover it yet. I'm gonna show it to you. So there's the pizza dough. I'm just gonna cover it with a towel. You could do saran wrap as well. Probably for about 2-ish hours. I really wanna see it rise and almost double. So now everything is done as far as cooking here. And the next step is to put it in a large, minimum 6-quart pan. And they add the remaining ingredients here. It smells so good, by the way. It really does. Okay, so I have ¾ cup white vinegar, as well as ½ cup of brandy. So we're gonna add that in. And then we're also going to add in thyme. I don't have, you can add a tablespoon of fresh thyme or a teaspoon of dried thyme. I have dried thyme, so I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of that. I'll eyeball it. As well as 2 teaspoons salt. And then 1 bay leaf. And so we're putting that all in there, and we are going to have it on medium-high heat. And we're going to stir it often, but cook this down for about 20 minutes or until it thickens. I imagine these figs are going to start really kind of breaking up. Smells really good. All right, so we'll let that come to probably a little simmer and let it thicken up. I just took the fig mixture off the stove. I'm going to show it to you. The figs did break up. It smells really good. So we are going to get this going. I've got some jars in my steam canner getting warmed up. We're going to get this processed. Get that bay leaf out. I've got a variety of jar sizes here. I did not have 8 of the ½ pints, and I really didn't want to do 4 full pints. So I've got a mixture because I actually think with some of the more decorative canning mason jars, this could be a good gift. So we're going to ladle it in. We need a ½ inch headspace. I think that's probably too much. Great, look how beautiful that is. So I'm gonna get these jarred up and then in the steam canner. Okay, all jars are filled. There is a 1/2 inch headspace. I'm just gonna clean up all the rims. Gotta be careful with figs, because if you can see, you know, the inside of the fig is all that little seedy meat, and I don't want to have any of those seeds on my rim. That would affect the seal. So I'm just wiping my rims really good. My steam canner is hot. Okay, we gotta get up to pressure and then the 15 minutes will start. I wanted to specify, you saw me put different size jars in the canner, right? But we're processing for 15 minutes because that is the recipe for 1 pint jars. I did not do any jars larger than a pint. And even though I did jars smaller, we always go with that larger processing time. And same as with if your recipe calls for pints, you can certainly go down to 1/2 pints. I would just keep the processing time the same, but you can't go up. You can't go from pint to quart and expect to do that same processing. You can only change from going smaller to larger if the recipe specifies it. If it does not say it, then it has not been accurately tested for safety to go to those larger quantities. So you can always go down, can't go up unless the recipe says it. The jars are done. So they processed for 15 minutes. I've let them cool for a decent amount of time. I just took them out of the steam canner and put them on the counter. And so they will sit there for 24 hours undisturbed. Don't be taking rings off, don't be moving them around. Leave them be so they can finish this whole sealing process within a 24-hour period. If any are not properly sealed after that 24 hours, put it in the fridge and just use that one first. All right, so those are done. Now let's go check my dough. I think it's been almost 2 hours and it has definitely risen, and I think it's plenty good. So what I'm gonna do is dump this out onto the counter, divide it into as much as possible 4 equal parts, wrap them in saran wrap, and then put them in the fridge. Okay, so I could weigh this out so I have 4 equal pieces. You can certainly do that. I am not. I'm gonna try to eyeball it as much as I can. Still a little sticky. So you wanna work fast and get it right into the saran wrap. It may help to have your hands a little wet too. And I'm just gonna wrap it up. And get it in the fridge. So you can See that one done? And I'm gonna get the next ones going. Okay, all 4 are wrapped up. I'm gonna put these in the fridge, let them cool, and then they will go into a freezer Ziploc bag and in the freezer. Okay, so I got them in the fridge. I just wanted to show you this. So this is a freezer bag with dough from the last time I made this. And so what happens is in the fridge is that it's gonna expand a little bit within the saran wrap, the plastic wrap. That's okay. And then, like I said, I'll just throw all 4 of them in a gallon freezer Ziploc bag, store them in the freezer till I'm ready, and then when I'm ready to make a pizza, I'll pull a dough out, leave it in the fridge or on the counter, depending on how quickly I need to make it, let it thaw, roll it out. And that's what I'm gonna show you we're gonna do next. Just not right now, because we're not eating pizza tonight. But you'll see that that's how you can easily have some dough ready in your freezer. We've got some amazing fig shallot preserves that'll be our base for one of our pizzas on Friday. And we'll come back on Friday and I'll show you how we roll all that out and bake it. Good morning! It's been a couple of days since we made our dough and our shallot fig preserve. So I took the bag out. This is the bag of dough. They're frozen. So I'm taking one out. I mean, it's rock hard right now. And I'm just gonna leave it on the counter for a couple of hours and let it thaw before we roll it out and start making our pizza. It's time to make some pizza. Finally, we're at this part of the project. So my dough has totally thawed and deflated. It's been sitting on the counter for about 3.5 hours. I have just turned my oven on to get that preheated. I put it at 475. Anywhere between 450 and 500 will work. Just whatever you feel comfortable with. So I go 475. I'm going to roll my dough out and then I'm gonna put it on my pizza stone and I'm actually gonna bake that first, bake the crust first, just a little bit before I put any toppings on. The reason I do this is it actually prevents the middle of the pizza from getting kind of soggy and not fully cooked. I've had that happen and so I find this works a lot better. I do have my pizza stone in the oven preheating with it. So that way I'm putting the dough on a hot stone in the hot oven. Okay, let's get this rolled out. So I'm gonna put some flour down just to kind of help keep it from sticking. And it will be a little sticky. So I kind of coat it in a good amount of flour and then start rolling. Now you only want to roll it as big as your pizza stone is. So try not to get too crazy. And you can kind of hand stretch it too. I end up doing that a little bit as well. By no means am I flipping this thing around like I'm in Italy. I'm not that good. But this is a good start. It's not exactly a circle. There's a little hole there. I find that when you do this too, your dough doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to be covering it up and it's going to taste great. So I think that's probably pretty good. I'm not going to go too much further than that. I'm just going to wait for everything to preheat and then we'll put it on the stone. So the stone is obviously hot. Carefully put my crust here, my dough. Again, it's not perfect. And it doesn't have to be because it's gonna be topped and delicious. All right, so I am going to bake that for about 8 minutes. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is take this off the stone and put it on a cutting board. And when I take it off, I'm actually flipping it so that the bottom side can release some of that steam. Just like that. Okay, and so I'm just gonna let that kind of release some of that steam and cool for just a few minutes before we top this and make our pizza. Right. It's pretty cool. It is ready to go. So I have one of my jars of the Brandied Fig Shallot preserves. I'm just gonna kind of spread this out. I'm definitely gonna use the whole jar. This is, like I said, the whole point of this was to kind of show you what you can do with these types of jams or preserves. There's a lot of really unique flavors that you can do, and a lot of the times, like I said, when I look at those recipes, it's like, that sounds really good, but what am I gonna do with it? How does it benefit me in my kitchen? And so we started doing these with pizzas last year, and they have quickly become some of the favorite pizzas of the house. So you can see the figs are still pretty whole. I think if I were to do that again, I would actually probably chop my figs up prior to roasting. In fact, I definitely would, but this is still gonna be delicious. Okay, so got that down, and then I actually have some homemade goat cheese that I am just gonna crumble on. You can easily go buy some goat cheese. I think a gorgonzola would probably be really good on here too, or a blue cheese. I think a gorgonzola is a little bit more mild, I think. That would be really good. And if you're not wanting to be too adventurous with the cheese, then absolutely just do like a mozzarella. Actually, you know what else would be good? It would be a ricotta. I think like kind of like what I'm doing, like drops of ricotta, I think would actually also be really good. Okay, so cheese is on. And then I've got some prosciutto over here that I purchased at the store. So I am just going to take some prosciutto and put that on as well. So this makes a really good kind of like fun pizza night, right? Family pizza night. But you know what else this really works well for? Is if you are having any kind of gathering, family event, social gathering, potluck, cooking this and then like cutting it into squares, smaller squares, it is a really good appetizer too. I'm actually gonna break the prosciutto up. All right, I am good with that. So I am going to put this in the oven for anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes. Look how beautiful that is. So all I am gonna do to make this even better is to put some fresh organic arugula on top. my gosh, it smells so good. And some balsamic vinegar. Now, what would make this even better is if I actually reduced this a little bit, reduced the vinegar, and I made it more like a little syrup. I'm just gonna do a light sprinkle. Whoops. And that's it. Dinner is ready. I hope this gave you some good ideas of what to do with some of those more unique jams or preserves that maybe you've made in the past or that someone has given to you as a gift. Try it as a pizza. Get creative with what you put on it. And I want you to try to make your own pizza dough. It is so simple and you can make 4 in advance, keep them in the freezer, defrost the morning of you're ready to cook, and you've got dinner going. And let me know if you try any of the recipes. Thanks so much. Stay healthy, stay well. See you next time.